care what those papers say. You are violating Rule 4, Section B. This dock is HOA property. Get out of here right now.
The morning they chained our dock ladder, the air was so cold it burned my nose, and the metal steps smelled like wet rust and lake water. I walked down with my coffee, steam in my face, and stopped dead. Heavy padlock, bright yellow chain, a plastic tag from our HOA swinging in the wind like a little smug flag. Access restricted pending safety review. My legs actually shook. That ladder was how my kids and I got into the water every day. I reached down, touched the frozen padlock, and it felt like someone's hand closing on my throat. It was May 3rd, 2024, and I had work in 1 hour. But I just stood there staring at that lock while ducks splashed around like nothing was wrong. Our dock sits at the back of the neighborhood, a shared strip everyone uses. Kayaks, fishing, late-night talks, and now a chain. So yeah, HOA padlocked the dock ladder for 48 hours. Then I filed the easement is basically the story of how our lake drama exploded. The note said it would stay locked for 48 hours while they decided appropriate access rules. It also said I'd be fined if I tampered with safety equipment. I went straight from the dock to the clubhouse, coffee still in my hand. The office smelled like cheap copier toner and old carpet. I tried to stay calm. I told the manager my kids needed that ladder, that no one had fallen, that nobody had even warned us. She just slid a paper toward me with this bored look. New rule. Board decision. If I had concerns, I could attend the emergency meeting at 9:00 p.m. that night. At the meeting, neighbors sat stiff, arms folded, eyes glued to the floor whenever I spoke. Our board president, Karen, smiled with all her teeth, but none of her eyes. She said the chain was for safety and people could just use the crowded main pool. When I asked for a compromise, she shrugged. Rules are rules. 2 days of lock, or it becomes permanent. She even hinted at a fine of $100 per day if I complained too loudly. The thing is, this wasn't the first time she had targeted us. Timeline item 1, April 5th at 4:27 a.m. false trespass call. She had called the cops because my cousin parked in the visitor spot while helping us move a kayak. The officer had said it very slowly. Patterns of false reports can be prosecuted. That line stuck in my head as I drove home from the meeting, hands tight on the wheel, windows fogging up from my breathing. I walked inside, saw my daughter sitting on the floor in her life jacket, holding her goggles, waiting for morning swim the next day, and that was the line in the sand for me. I told my wife I wasn't going to cut any chains or scream at Karen. I was going to use the channels they liked to hide behind. Proper channels only. Then I opened my laptop. I started with the history. Old emails from Karen about dock noise. Photos of the ladder in perfect shape. The warning letter about my cousin's truck. I lined up photos, emails, and call logs in a binder. I wrote down every date and time. Then I dug into something they probably hoped no one would ever read. The original subdivision plat and the recorded easements. My uncle is a retired surveyor, so I called him. He laughed and told me exactly where to look. That dock, he explained, wasn't just a random HOA toy. It was a recorded lake access easement tied to our lot and 3 others. A recorded easement beats a new HOA rule every time. I pulled it up on the county website. Black lines on a scan map, grainy but clear. Access easement, shared use, cannot be blocked. I printed everything. By the time I was done, the stack of papers looked like a small novel. The file landed with 63 pages. I took it to the city's code enforcement office and sat there while a clerk flipped through my binder. I showed them the easement, the lock, the threats of fines. I also filed a written complaint that the HOA was blocking safe egress to the water since the ladder was listed in our original plans as an emergency exit point. The inspector, a tired man with a thick mustache, looked at the padlock photo and actually snorted. He scheduled a site visit for Saturday at 3:00 p.m. That just happened to be the time Karen had announced a lake safety walkthrough with the board. I didn't plan that part. Call it poetic zoning. Saturday came hot and bright, with the smell of sunscreen and grilled burgers floating over the water. The board gathered at the dock in their matching polo shirts. Karen stood with a clipboard like she was directing a crime show. Neighbors circled, some with phones already out. I showed up with the inspector and my binder tucked under my arm. When he asked who authorized the lock, Karen lifted her chin and said she did, as board president. The inspector didn't even look at her. He opened my binder, tapped the easement page, and read it out loud so everyone could hear. Then he pointed at the lock and said it had to come off. Now, Karen tried to argue, but he just repeated it louder. This is a recorded easement. You cannot obstruct it. You are in violation of code and your own governing documents. Point one neighbor started recording right then, super close. Another whispered, this is going on the Facebook group. Someone else muttered, I'm tagging the HOA horror story page. Karen's face turned the color of overcooked lobster. When she refused to touch the lock, the inspector told her that every minute it stayed on was another count against the HOA. He glanced at me and asked if I had the key. I said no, very pleasantly. Karen finally hissed at the maintenance guy to get bolt cutters. As he snapped the chain, people actually clapped. Kids behind me cheered like it was a fireworks show. By that night, the video of the lock coming off had been posted 3 times in our neighborhood group and twice on TikTok by some teenagers down the street. The comments were brutal and hilarious. Monday morning, the board got an official notice. The inspector had cited them for blocking an emergency access point and violating the recorded easement. They were ordered to restore full use of the dock, remove any future locks, and send written notice to all affected owners admitting the error. The city also noted that any further harassment or bogus calls could be reviewed, and you bet I highlighted the part about patterns and false reports when I read it. At the next HOA meeting, attendance was packed. People were not scared anymore. They were mad. Someone counted out loud the number of complaints Karen had filed in the last year. 19. After an hour of questions, she stepped down for personal reasons. The HOA's insurance has to cover the city fines and my filing fees, which came to a little over $300. Now the ladder is always clear. No chain, no padlock. On warm nights, neighbors sit on the dock and dip their feet in, sharing snacks and stories instead of angry emails. One of the older neighbors brought over a thermos of coffee on the first morning the ladder reopened and said he was proud of me for fighting with paper instead of fists. Kids race down the boards and jump into the water, screaming and laughing. I still keep the binder on a shelf by my desk, just in case anybody forgets what an easement means, but mostly it just makes me smile. Please follow for more HOA showdowns like this. Do you think she got what she deserves? Comment below.